What up, yo? Salam alaikum. My name is Hakim Malema, aka Trash God, and that's also the name of the label. It's called Trash God. My area of focus as a creative artist is what I describe as I'm an audio-visual performer. So I make music, like in terms of like producing it, writing lyrics as well, and then combining it with the visual element, which I do myself as well. And those are my main disciplines. Yeah. A lot of things inspire me. Like beauty inspires me, like things being beautiful, like aesthetics, like whether it's like sonically aesthetic or like a beautiful song, piece of music, or like a well-made jacket, or like a beautiful girl. That's what inspires me. From a just like from a personal level, from a creative level, there's also a lot of things that inspire me, like just trying to make things different to what I feel things are usually done. So just like approaching making music from a different perspective, or approaching making clothes from a different perspective. Like the label Trash God was actually founded out of a need to spread awareness around like awareness around awareness like awareness around like how do we make stuff, like I think because Africa is going to be the next frontier for anything dope that's going to come out of the world, and the innovation isn't just going to come from like the design or like how cool people look. The innovation is going to come from like how do we do things, like how are we producing clothes. Are we producing clothes using cotton that actually destroys the planet, or are we using hemp cotton, which is more biodegradable and which is more reusable? Are we going to continue to use oil and petrol, which is creating holes in the ozone layer, or are we going to move towards solar power? I think these are the things that we need to think about, like as creatives, as people who are making creative things or coming up with creative solutions for things. Well, I think we have to, we gotta go the next level up. It's not just about making a creative thing. We should make creative things creatively, and I think that's the main inspiration anyway behind Trash God, and that's a big inspiration for what I do. I was born in Swaziland. My mom is from Swaziland. My dad is from South Africa. My mom is like partially European, so she moved to South Africa way back when. She met my dad. They were doing their thing, but they were doing it during the apartheid time, so they couldn't like do their thing as freely as they wanted. So they moved to Swaziland, where my mom's from, and carried on doing their thing a little more. Then they had me, and then after Madiba's long walk to freedom, they moved back to South Africa, and I've been staying here like basically my whole life. Yeah. My advice, or if I'm allowed to give advice, if I'm in any position to like dish out advice to a young African, not just in the creative industry but just like in life, is we living in such an interesting time in the world right now, where like Africa, like I said this before, but I mean, like it's the truth. It's gonna happen. Africa is the last frontier for dope shit. It's the last frontier for anything that's gonna change the world. Is gonna come from Africa. Like America's already, they've had their time. They're kind of degenerating. Europe is kind of just plateaued on where it is. Asia, they fluctuate. But I think the biggest changes are gonna come from Africa, because in Africa we experience, in my opinion, like a more diverse set of problems. Like we've got the most resources on the continent, in the world, but we also have like the poorest populations, and it's these dichotomies that are gonna make rise to like the leaders and the engineers and the pioneers of tomorrow. When I say engineers, I don't mean like chemical engineers or whatever. I mean those too. But the people who are going to engineer change in the world, like your Bransons and Zuckerbergs and those people, those people are going to come from Africa because of the diversity of the issues that we have here. So my advice would be, you know, like we've got a lot of Western media that, you know, that's feeding us a lot of stuff. Most of it's garbage, some of it's helpful, and in the midst of that, it's like you just gotta find your, find your voice, as a figure of speech. Find your strings. Play your instrument the way you know best. Don't conform to how things are done in the world to fit into a worldly way of doing things. I think, like I'm saying, because innovation is going to come from here, we have to do things in Africa the way we see fit. We have to solve our problems in our way. For instance, so if we're going to be making clothes, let's not buy materials from the Chinese manufacturer who is buying it for really cheap, processing it and selling it back to you at triple the price. We should be focusing on creating microeconomies which are gonna create self-sustainable employment for the people around us, as an example. And I think like that's an example of a creative solution to an African problem. So yeah, my advice would be to come up with solutions for the problems in your environment where you are that are applicable for you there, because once it happens there, then the rest of the world will see that's actually, that's a dope idea, that's going to change everything, and then they'll just jump on and jack it like they always do. But I think the most important thing is to not try and fit into the way that things are being done in the world currently, because that's just going to set you back like a lot. Like from a music perspective, it really disappoints me when I hear a lot of like trap style music coming from African kids, because we've got like this plethora of sound that comes from this continent which we can tap into, and we can be inspired by, like your Angelique Kujos, Fela Kutis, Hugh Masikelas. We got all these people, Salif Keita, and it's like Oliver Mtuguti. Like there's so many people here or who are from this continent who like the people whom I named are perfect examples of coming up with an African solution for an African problem. And I think if African kids can apply that mindset to solving problems, then like I definitely think we'll change the world we're living in right now. Okay, so I mean, already the name is a paradox or an oxymoron, whichever one, because trash is like garbage or waste, and then God is like an omnipotent thing. But that's where the interest comes in, because God is omnipotent, trash is actually omnipotent, and it should be, because trash needs to be reused right now in the world. Like we've got a certain percentage of mechanical waste and bio waste and all sorts of waste that we are expending, that's not going anywhere, that's going into dump sites, that's being burnt. That those things that are being burnt are creating holes in the ozone layer. There's just like there's all these exponential problems that come from not reusing. Okay, so the idea of trash is like, how do we share and spread awareness around something that is pretty simple to understand, but that's not really explained to people in a simple way. So the whole trash thing, the way that it started, it was like a bunch of kids in Bromfontein. We'd hang out every weekend, and we'd just like be on the corner, just like having fun and everything. And there was like a perception, like torn jeans and like crazy hair. There's a perception that like these kids are trash. Like you look at them, they're trashy looking kids. And it's like, so there again is like another play on the whole thing. It's like, now we are these kids, we look a certain way, and it's like that could be like to the people who are watching this video, you might be perceived in a negative connotation, but actually you've got like a lot of positive ideas, and you got a lot of things that you want to do that are positive, but just because of the perception that's like is created about you, you come off as trash, and people don't really see the God in you. So it's like it's really layered. So from that perspective, it's like kind of to deal with a social identity, like a misrepresentation that's given to people who look a certain way. And then on the other side, it's to spread awareness about food shortages and water shortages, food security, clean energy. These are things that we need to talk about. And when I say we, I mean people under the age of 25. And because this is a content platform for people in Africa, this is like exactly where I'd want this message to go. Is people under the age of 25 living in Africa, like what do we know about water shortages? Like, do we know that there's droughts happening like all over the continent right now? Do we understand that droughts affect food security? Because if there's droughts, then people lose livestock, then we lose crops, and then we have a problem with food security. If we continue, like I said this before, if we continue to use unhealthy ways of creating textiles, do we understand that we're gonna destroy the planet in terms of agriculture? Because you can only, for example, plant cotton in a place a certain amount of times before it destroys the topsoil, and then the topsoil becomes no nutrition in the topsoil. So it's like, how are we going to alleviate those things? You know what I'm saying? Like we need to investigate like hemp cotton, and hemp cotton is a much healthier and cleaner way for the planet, and it's a much healthier and cleaner way to make clothes. You know, like leaving oil and moving towards other types of clean energies like solar energies. Even hemp energy is another form of energy. You know, and in terms of food security, we need to rethink our diets, man. Like, what are we eating? What are we putting into our bodies? How is that stuff being made? You know, are we educating ourselves on making like little gardens at home, like vegetable patches and things like that? So that's the big main idea for trash, on a larger, I guess, continental scale. But initially the idea was to try and create a relatability around the perception thing, and once kids who relate to the perception thing, once we have their attention, then we shift their attention towards the bigger issue, because it's the kids under the age of 25 who are going to be on the planet the longest. Like, it's not our parents, it's not our parents and grandparents are going to die. They aren't going to live through the next great drought or the next great famine or whatever, if such a thing is to happen. The people who are going to live through that is us. We're going to live through that. And how do we change people's minds around that thing? And it's like, we need to as a youth, we need to be focusing on these things, because these things are going to they're going to affect us, you know. And it's like another message that I always want to talk about is that, you know, everybody, I mean, I'm saying this now, and I make music and I do visuals and stuff, but had I known these things much earlier on in my life, I might have made different decisions in terms of like a career path. You know, like if I had somebody around me like me who was saying, you know, actually maybe it's a good idea to go into agriculture, because if you can innovate agriculture, it's really going to be a culture. It's going to create a culture shift, you know. So what I'm doing now is like I'm saying to kids out there, it's not about being a rapper. It's not about being on TV. It's not about having 100,000 Instagram followers. It's about like making visible change in your community. And sometimes rappers and musicians make visible change, but you know, a lot of the time they don't. The people who make changes in communities are the people on the ground, putting food in people's mouths, not literally, but creating the means so that they can do that for themselves. The people who are, you know, teaching people about better forms of energy, you know. So that's another message that I'd really like to get across, that like agriculture is cool, you know. That's basically it. Like, agriculture is cool. It's just as cool as making music. And you can always make music and be a farmer at the same time. Like, it's not hard. I know a lot of old guys who play guitar and stuff, and they farm. So don't limit yourself to a perception or a perspective, and don't box yourself because somebody put you in that box. You know what I'm saying? Like, being cool is not about looking cool. It's about what you do. Is what you do cool? Do you positively affect people's lives? For me, that's what being cool is. So if trash is cool for that reason, then yeah, it's cool.